July 23, 1945. The Sea of Okhotsk was as black as spilled ink when Commander Eugene Fluckey surfaced USS Barb just 12 miles off the Japanese home island of Karafuto. The war in the Pacific was entering its final, violent weeks, but no one aboard the Barb knew that. What they did know was that tonight, they were preparing to do something no American submarine had ever attempted, something no doctrine, no admiral, and no training manual had even imagined. 8 sailors gathered on the heaving deck, their silhouettes outlined only by the faint glow of the northern stars. Each man carried a piece of a homemade bomb, a 55-pound explosive charge fitted with a micro-switch trigger rig from glass pickle jar. It was crude, improvised, the kind of device the Navy would never officially approve. But it was exactly what Fluckey needed. From the bridge, Fluckey watched his landing party climb into a pair of canvas-skinned boats. The surf pounded the rocky coastline ahead, and beyond that, somewhere in the night, ran a Japanese railway line hauling troops and ammunition south toward the crumbling front. Hitting that line would do more than destroy a train. It would strike the Japanese homeland itself, something no American ground force had yet done in this war. This wasn't a torpedo attack. This wasn't reconnaissance. This was an American submarine conducting a land operation on Japan's own soil. Every regulation said it was madness. Fluckey disagreed. As the boats pushed away from the submarine, the men paddled into a thick silence broken only by the rhythm of oars dipping into black water. Behind them, the Barb sank back into the shadows, her diesel engines throttled low, watching like a predator waiting for the moment to strike. Tomorrow, the entire Japanese coastline would feel the shock of what these 8 sailors were about to do. Eugene Fluckey was not the kind of man the Navy expected to redefine submarine warfare. He didn't look the part. He didn't act the part. And he certainly didn't think the way doctrine told him to. At 41 years old, he carried himself with a mix of calm calculation and reckless confidence. The kind of commander who studied manuals carefully, then ignored half of what was written in them. By the summer of 1945, Fluckey had already become a legend. During his 11th patrol, he'd done what every textbook insisted was suicide. He brought Barb into Nam Quan Harbor, a narrow, heavily defended inlet crawling with Japanese escorts, and launched a night torpedo attack at point-blank range. After sinking an entire convoy and drawing every spotlight and gun on the Chinese coast, he pushed Barb to a record-breaking escape speed of 23.5 knots, the fastest ever achieved by an American submarine in combat. For that, he earned the Medal of Honor. Yet none of that changed the simple truth. Submarine warfare in 1945 was shrinking. Targets were fewer. Japanese convoys were scattered. The enemy was cornered, desperate, but still deadly. Many commanders became cautious. Fluckey became more aggressive. When the Navy debated launching rockets from submarines at shore installations, most dismissed it as a gimmick. Fluckey turned Barb into the first submarine in the Pacific to fire rockets at land targets. When they said submarines couldn't operate in shallow coastal waters, he took Barb into 30 feet of depth, so shallow the keel nearly scraped sand. What drove him was not recklessness. It was opportunity, and on the charts before him. As Barb patrolled the frigid waters off Karafuto, he found one more opportunity that no manual could prepare him for. A single-track Japanese rail line running dangerously close to the shoreline. To the Navy, it was irrelevant. To Fluckey, it was a weak point, and weak points begged to be exploited. If he could destroy a Japanese supply train on their own homeland, it would send a message far louder than any torpedo ever could. But submarines did not carry demolition teams. Submarines did not land troops. Submarines did not conduct ground attacks. So Fluckey came to a simple conclusion. If doctrine didn't allow it, doctrine had to change. And the only way to change doctrine was to succeed. The coast of Karafuto, what the Japanese called Southern Sakhalin, was not a place submarines were meant to operate. The waters were shallow, unpredictable, and lined with patrol boats. The shoreline was dotted with listening posts and guarded rail stations. Any skipper with sense stayed offshore, hunting freighters in safer, deeper seas. But Commander Fluckey was not looking for ships anymore. He was looking for impact. One overcast morning, while scanning the coastline through a pair of salt-stained binoculars, he noticed something few others would have recognized as significant. A thin ribbon of steel track emerging from a small coastal treeline, cutting across a narrow embankment and vanishing into another curve of forest. A rail line, close enough to the shore that Barb could observe it without entering a harbor. To most submarine captains, it was a trivial detail. To Fluckey, it was a strategic artery. Japan's logistics relied increasingly on interior rail movement to compensate for the scarcity of cargo ships. If a supply train could be hit, especially one transporting munitions, the psychological and material damage would be enormous. But hitting it with torpedoes was impossible. The track was too high above the water, and even if a torpedo exploded nearby, it wouldn't derail a 16-car train. The coastline was out of range for rockets. Shelling from the deck gun would reveal Barb's position instantly, risking destruction before accomplishing anything meaningful. There was only one solution, and it was the one no submarine commander in the Pacific had ever suggested. A shore party. 8 men, 1 bomb, a landing on the Japanese home islands. It was unthinkable. No submarine captain had authorized such an action. No doctrine permitted landing men from a submarine onto enemy territory for a demolition mission. The risks were staggering. Patrols combed the area. The coastline was mined. Civilians lived nearby and could betray any intruders. Worst of all, if the team was discovered, the submarine could not wait for them. Japanese counterattacks were swift and overwhelming. A stranded landing party would be left to die alone. Yet as Fluckey studied the line through the periscope, something crystallized in his mind. This was more than a target. It was an opportunity to show what submarines could be. Not just underwater predators, but flexible platforms capable of shaping battles on land, sea, and air. He gathered his officers in the control room. He pointed to the map. He outlined the plan calmly, as if discussing a routine torpedo spread. When he finished, the compartment was silent. Finally, one officer spoke what all were thinking. "Skipper, are we really sending men ashore?" Fluckey responded with the faintest hint of a smile. "No, we're sending history ashore." The plan spread through the submarine like an electric current. A shore party. On Japan. No one had ever attempted anything like it. Not Marines, not Army Special Forces, not even the OSS. And now a submarine crew, trained for silent running and torpedo spreads, was being asked to make history on foot behind enemy lines, armed with nothing but knives, pistols, and a homemade explosive built out of scrap parts. Fluckey didn't ask for volunteers at first. He didn't need to. Within minutes, half the crew tried to sign up. Machinists claimed they were excellent swimmers. Torpedo men insisted they could handle demolitions. Even the cook said he could stab a guard if it came to it. But Fluckey wasn't looking for enthusiasm. He needed precision, calm nerves, and men who could operate in total silence under absolute darkness. He needed sailors who could think clearly while carrying death on their backs. The final 8 were hand-picked. Chief Gunner's mate Paul Saunders, steady as steel. Motor machinist mate Bill Walker, dependable and quiet. Electrician's mate Nolan Pappy Haugen, the technical brain. Torpedo man 3rd Class Francis Sevier, wiry and fast. Yeoman 3rd Class Henry Garbo, calm under pressure. Signalman 2nd Class Billy Hatfield, sharp-eyed and fearless. 2 more junior sailors, competent and trusted. Fluckey refused to go himself, not because he wouldn't risk it. He had already proven he would. But because the submarine needed a captain. If anything went wrong, Barb had to escape immediately, and only one man could command that maneuver. Before the mission, the 8 gathered around the bomb in the forward torpedo room. It looked crude, improvised, because it was a 55-pound explosive charge with a firing device made from a microswitch housed in a pickle jar. The simplicity made it brilliant. Pressure from the rails would trigger the circuit, detonating the charge the moment a train rolled over it. The bomb didn't look like the weapon that might change the course of submarine operations. It looked like something a handful of mechanics had built behind a gas station after closing hours. But the device wasn't the point. The plan was, when the sun began to set, Barb surfaced under the cover of a low fog bank. The shoreline appeared as a thin shadow, the forest behind it like a dark wall of silence. Japanese patrols would be sparse at this hour, but never absent. The 8-man team gathered on deck wearing blackened uniforms and canvas shoes. Each man carried nothing that could identify him as American. If they were caught, the Japanese would assume they were commandos or saboteurs. Capture meant torture, then execution. Fluckey shook each man's hand personally. No speeches, no dramatics. Just a firm grip and a quiet nod. Be quick, be quiet, and come home, he said. They lowered the rubber boat into the cold water. The men climbed in, oars dipped silently. No one looked back. Under a moonless sky, 8 sailors paddled toward the Japanese homeland to carry out the only U.S. ground operation on those islands in the entire war. The 8-man landing party approached the jagged shoreline silently, the surf curling over the edges of the small rubber boat. Every splash, every whisper of fabric against wood could betray them. On shore, the forest loomed like a wall of black, concealing enemy sentries, mines, and the unknown dangers of the Japanese mainland. They beached the craft carefully, dragging it above the high tide line. Each paddle stroke, each footfall on wet sand, demanded absolute control. Any mistake could reveal them, ending the mission before it even began. The night was cold, the air salty, and every man carried the weight of history on his shoulders. Once ashore, the team moved inland toward the railway tracks. Fluckey had studied the approach meticulously. They avoided the main paths, sticking to narrow gullies and overgrown clearings. The forest, dense and silent, became their ally. The sounds of the sea masked their movements, and the shadows shielded them from any patrols that might wander too close. They reached the track. A 16-car supply train stood stationary in the darkness, its cargo of ammunition and troops entirely unaware of the danger creeping toward them. The men worked with precision. The improvised bomb, heavy and awkward, was positioned directly beneath the rails, the microswitch aligned to detonate when the train rolled forward. Every action was rehearsed, every step critical. One misplacement could render the operation useless, or worse, alert the enemy. As they finished, they paused, listening. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then, silently, they retreated back to the shoreline, blending once again with the shadows. Fluckey watched from Barb, tension coiling in every muscle. The first movement of the train triggered the bomb. The explosion ripped through the quiet night, a thunderous detonation that lit the horizon like magnesium fire. Rails twisted, cars toppled, and ammunition ignited in a cascade of sparks and smoke. Fluckey's crew saw the glow even from their submerged observation point. The coastline illuminated for miles. It was a mission that defied every regulation, every expectation, every concept of what submarines could do. 8 men had altered the Pacific theater in a single, daring night. The roar of the explosion faded into the night, leaving only the echoing crack of splintered rails and the distant cries of startled Japanese troops. Fluckey knew that time was now their greatest enemy. The landing party had achieved the impossible, but the coast was still dangerous. Patrols would arrive within minutes, and the rubber boat was their only lifeline back to Barb. The 8 sailors paddled swiftly, keeping low to avoid silhouetting against the faint glow of the fire they had ignited. The surf was rougher on the return, tossing the lightweight craft against rocks and debris. Every man gripped the edges, muscles straining, eyes scanning the shoreline for the slightest hint of movement. One alert sentry, one misstep could end the mission in disaster. Meanwhile, Fluckey maneuvered the submarine closer to facilitate the extraction, but cautiously. Any sign of the Barb could draw coastal batteries or patrols to the area. His heart raced as he listened to the faint splashes of paddles. In moments like these, years of experience mattered more than training. He knew the ocean, the currents, the the tides, and the behaviors of enemy patrols better than anyone. The sailors finally reached the submerged sub, hauling the boat aboard as quietly as possible. Each man was soaked, exhausted, and exhilarated. They had completed the only ground operation on the Japanese home islands during the war, a mission that would be recounted in naval annals forever. Fluckey immediately ordered the Barb to dive. Once submerged, he navigated the submarine away from the coast at minimal depth, using the underwater currents to mask their departure. Every sonar ping or patrol boat was a potential death sentence, yet Barb slipped away undetected. By sunrise, they were safely in open waters, the glow of the destroyed train fading behind them. The operation was more than a tactical victory. It proved that submarines could operate flexibly, projecting power inland, striking critical infrastructure, and returning to sea without being engaged. It shattered conventional thinking and forced naval command to reconsider the strategic possibilities of undersea warfare. That night, Fluckey's 8-man team celebrated quietly. There were no parades, no fanfare, only the quiet satisfaction of men who had done the impossible. The world above the waves would take time to recognize it, but for those on Barb, the message was clear: submarines were no longer limited to torpedoes and stealth. The raid on Karafuto was not just a one-time exploit. It was a paradigm shift in submarine operations. Until that night, submarines were regarded almost exclusively as underwater torpedo platforms. Their mission profiles were narrow: hunt enemy shipping, avoid detection, and strike when opportunity arose. Surface actions were limited to deck guns, and any venture onto land was considered reckless or suicidal. Fluckey's mission changed all of that. Naval strategists studying the operation realized that Barb had demonstrated an entirely new dimension of power projection. A submarine could infiltrate hostile coastlines, land small teams, and strike infrastructure critical to enemy operations. Trains, bridges, ammunition depots, and fuel storage. All of these could be targeted without risking larger ground forces. The implications extended beyond the Pacific. If adapted, similar operations could support Allied advances in Europe or disrupt supply chains elsewhere. Fluckey's tactics were meticulous. Every risk had been calculated. The landing team had trained in small boat handling, night navigation, and improvised demolition. Every step had a contingency. The bomb's design, though simple, was tested repeatedly for timing and reliability. Fluckey's insistence on preparation turned an audacious idea into a controlled and effective strike. USS Barb herself had become more than a submarine. She had become a mobile base, a launch platform for commando operations. The raid proved that under certain conditions, submarines could operate close to shore, deploy teams silently, and recover them without detection. Previous assumptions about coastal depth, surf conditions, and patrol patterns were rewritten. The psychological impact was equally profound. Japanese forces, already under constant pressure, were confronted by the fact that the American Navy could strike their home territory itself. Even the threat of a repeat operation forced them to divert troops, patrols, and surveillance to areas previously considered safe. This created new vulnerabilities that the Allies could exploit in the final weeks of the war. Fluckey's daring vision, combined with precise execution, proved that innovation could redefine doctrine. The Navy's understanding of submarine utility was forever expanded, and the raid became a case study in risk, leadership, and the extraordinary capabilities of trained, motivated crews operating under bold, unorthodox commands. What made the Karafuto raid successful went beyond engineering, planning, or navigation. It was the human element. Fluckey's 8-man landing party exemplified discipline, courage, and trust. These men were not elite commandos. They were ordinary sailors trained in torpedoes, engines, and electronics, suddenly asked to conduct a mission that blurred the line between naval operations and land warfare. Each member faced intense psychological pressure. The darkness concealed danger, but it also magnified every sound. The whisper of wind through trees, the The distant click of rails under the stationary train, the occasional splash of a wave against rocks. One misstep, one premature reaction, could alert nearby Japanese guards and trigger a firefight with little chance of escape. Yet the men moved with calculated calm, demonstrating that training under extreme conditions, when combined with trust and leadership, could produce outcomes beyond expectation. Fluckey's leadership style was crucial. He delegated authority while maintaining strict oversight, allowing his men to execute complex tasks independently while knowing he was prepared to intervene if anything went wrong. His faith in their abilities fostered confidence, which was vital when improvisation became necessary. Every movement was deliberate. Every pause was intentional. Each sailor internalized both the gravity of the mission and the expectation of precision. The psychological dimension extended to timing and coordination. Approaching the shore in darkness, they had to calculate tide, current, and the train's schedule simultaneously. Misjudging any variable could have been fatal. Yet, the team's unwavering focus transformed extreme risk into operational effectiveness. This operation demonstrated that small units, operating under exceptional leadership and rigorous preparation, could achieve what larger forces could not. Courage alone was not enough. It had to be matched with skill, planning, and the discipline to execute under extraordinary pressure. In Fluckey's hands, the human element became as formidable a weapon as the torpedoes or deck guns of the Barb. The raid's success was not just a technical or tactical victory. It was a testament to leadership and human performance under conditions that most military manuals would label impossible. The explosion on the Japanese rail line was more than a tactical victory. It sent ripples through the strategic landscape of the Pacific War. For decades, military planners had assumed that the Japanese home islands were inviolable by small-scale Allied operations. Coastal defenses, inland railways, and natural geography provided a sense of security. Fluckey's operation shattered that assumption. Japanese forces were forced to reallocate troops and resources to protect previously secure areas. Rail lines that carried ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements were suddenly vulnerable, creating logistical bottlenecks that hindered troop movements and supply chains. Even the threat of another small-scale submarine raid forced the Japanese to stretch their already depleted resources further, weakening their ability to respond to conventional attacks. For the U.S. Navy, the implications were equally profound. Submarines had traditionally been measured by tonnage sunk. Freighters, cargo ships, tankers. Fluckey showed that strategic value could also be measured in impact on enemy infrastructure, psychological disruption, and the demonstration of capability. Commanders began considering submarine-based raids as part of a broader operational strategy, integrating surface, underwater, and unconventional tactics into a cohesive approach. The Karafuto raid also highlighted the versatility of American crews. Ordinary sailors, with proper leadership, could perform missions previously thought to require elite forces. This realization influenced training programs, encouraging cross-disciplinary skills, night navigation proficiency, and improvisation under pressure. Fluckey had created a model in miniature, a team capable of operating independently, exploiting enemy vulnerabilities, and returning safely without direct confrontation. Historians later recognized the raid as a turning point in naval warfare philosophy. It was not a large-scale battle or a decisive fleet engagement, but it illustrated that initiative, innovation, and courage could achieve results disproportionate to the resources used. A single submarine, 8 men, and 1 improvised explosive had altered the assumptions of both American and Japanese military planners in the final months of the war. USS Barb's 12th War Patrol, culminating in the Karafuto raid, cemented her reputation as one of the most effective and innovative submarines of World War II. By the end of the patrol, Barb had sunk 17 Japanese ships, totaling 96,628 tons, ranking 4th among all U.S. submarines in the conflict. Every achievement, however, paled in comparison to the impact of the raid itself, a mission that challenged assumptions about the limitations of undersea warfare. Fluckey's tactical creativity became a benchmark for future operations. Naval schools studied the raid as a textbook example of initiative, leadership, and the integration of unconventional tactics into conventional warfare. The operation proved that small units, supported by a single platform, could accomplish objectives that would normally require larger, riskier assaults. Submarine crews began to be trained for multi-domain operations, understanding that the ocean was not just a battleground, but a launch pad for striking critical targets on land. The raid also inspired psychological innovation in warfare. Japanese forces were forced to consider that threats could come from unexpected vectors, from the sea, the shore, and under the cover of darkness. This reallocation of enemy resources, the constant vigilance induced by the potential of further raids, and the disruption of supply lines amplified the operational value of Barb's patrols far beyond tonnage sunk. One daring mission achieved an effect that dozens of conventional strikes could not replicate. For the crew, the patrol reinforced the importance of cohesion, training, and trust. Each sailor understood that extraordinary missions required both discipline and creativity, and the success of the landing party validated Fluckey's approach to leadership. Empower capable men, trust their judgment, and orchestrate risk with precision. By the time Barb returned to base, the story of 8 men landing on Japanese soil had already begun to spread among the fleet. Even as the war entered its final weeks, the operation remained a vivid reminder that courage, ingenuity, and audacity could redefine the tools and tactics of modern naval combat. The Navy recognized Fluckey's actions, awarding him the Medal of Honor for extraordinary heroism. Unlike most submarine awards, which focused on tonnage sunk or daring torpedo attacks, Fluckey's citation highlighted creativity, leadership, and the bold integration of unconventional tactics. It was a unique acknowledgement, one that set a precedent for how innovation and initiative could be formally recognized in military operations. Fluckey's leadership philosophy became a study in balancing risk with opportunity. Senior officers examined how he empowered his crew, allowed autonomy in execution, and mitigated operational hazards without micromanaging. The 8 sailors who carried out the Karafuto raid became examples of the extraordinary potential in ordinary personnel when guided by capable leadership. Each member's discipline, situational awareness, and courage were emphasized in post-war debriefings, demonstrating that unconventional missions could be replicated safely with proper planning and training. The tactical lessons extended beyond the Pacific. Submarines around the world began exploring the concept of special operations forces delivery, coastal raids, and multi-domain engagements. Fluckey had shown that a single submarine could serve as a strategic platform, capable of shaping outcomes far beyond its immediate presence. Future naval doctrine began incorporating these lessons, influencing how small naval units were deployed for maximum effect with minimal risk. Historians note that the raid's significance lies not in the size of the force or the tonnage destroyed, but in its demonstration of possibility. Conventional wisdom had been overturned. Submarines were not limited to torpedoes and deck guns. They could be platforms for ingenuity, precision strikes, and psychological disruption. Fluckey's actions became a case study in military academies, illustrating how a single, bold decision could expand the boundaries of naval warfare. The operation cemented USS Barb and her crew in history, proving that leadership, planning, and audacity could achieve results far beyond conventional expectations. It was a defining moment in submarine warfare, a moment that redefined what was possible when courage met innovation. The Karafuto raid remained unparalleled in World War II, the only U.S. ground operation conducted on the Japanese home islands. Its success left a lasting imprint on military strategy, naval doctrine, and the culture of innovation within the U.S. Navy. Commander Eugene Fluckey and his crew demonstrated that audacity, meticulous planning, and the human element could extend the reach of warfare beyond the perceived limits of technology. Fluckey's decision to send 8 sailors ashore with a single improvised explosive exemplified the highest principles of leadership under risk. Every movement, every calculation, and every contingency plan was executed with precision, resulting in an operation that was both daring and tactically transformative. The destruction of a 16-car Japanese supply train disrupted enemy logistics, forced defensive reallocations, and proved that the home islands were not beyond reach, even in the final weeks of the war. The raid influenced post-war submarine design and tactics. Submarines were no longer seen solely as undersea predators. They became multi-role platforms capable of supporting commando operations, shore bombardments, and covert insertion of small teams. Training programs emphasized versatility, innovation, and small unit cohesion. Fluckey's patrol demonstrated that with the right combination of leadership, crew discipline, and improvisation, unconventional missions could achieve strategic objectives that conventional forces could not. Fluckey himself became a legend, a symbol of boldness and ingenuity. His Medal of Honor recognized not only the technical success of his patrols, but also the intellectual courage to redefine what a submarine could do. USS Barb, her crew, and the 8 sailors who carried out the landing exemplified the extraordinary results possible when leadership and audacity combine. Today, the Karafuto raid stands as a singular episode in naval history. It is studied in military academies worldwide as an example of risk management, strategic creativity, and the enduring importance of human skill and decision-making under extreme conditions. Fluckey's patrol proved that even in the face of rigid doctrine and overwhelming risk, innovation and courage could permanently change the rules of warfare. The lessons of that night remain relevant, inspiring generations of sailors, strategists, and leaders to push boundaries and rethink the possible.